Hello, and welcome to the Washington Courts Report, the official podcast of the Administrative Office of the Courts, where I cover some of the most exciting news from the AOC and around the Washington court system as a whole. I'm your host, Patric Haerle, and today we're going to be going over Family Reunification Month with Tonia McClanahan, a parent voice advocacy manager with the Office of Public Defense and co-chair of the Family Reunification Day Steering Committee, who has lived experience with the reunification process as a parent. We'll discuss the family reunification celebrations that have been happening this summer and gain some valuable insight into the reunification process as a whole. I'm looking forward to a great conversation, so let's dive right in. Reunification of families is the primary goal of dependency, the legal process in which dependent children are taken into the oversight of the state. As of March 2024, there were over 7,000 Washington children in out-of-home care. The majority of children separated from their parents, about 60%, return home after parents make improvements that are guided by child welfare workers and monitored by courts. To celebrate these families coming together again, June is Family Reunification Month in Washington, as proclaimed by Governor Jay Inslee and the Supreme Court Commission on Children in Foster Care. But this year, the statewide celebrations for Family Reunification Month are being supported at any time that works for a court and their community. This year, 15 counties across Washington have either held family reunification celebrations or plan to hold them in the coming weeks to bring parents and children together with judicial officers, child welfare workers, law enforcement, and community members to recognize the hard work of parents and support bringing families back together after separation. The events recognize both families who have completed reunifications and those currently working to reunify their families. So, to discuss these celebration events and family reunification as a whole, I'd like to welcome Tonia McClanahan, co-chair of the Family Reunification Day Steering Committee, to the show.
Thank you.
Tonia, just to get us started, we know reunification is the primary goal of the dependency process. But let's dig a little bit into the why. Why is it so important to reunify children with their families versus keeping them in out-of-home care through the state?
Well, I think there's years and years of data and numbers to show that children thrive better, their mental health is better when they're with their parent. Good, bad, or otherwise, children seek their parents out. And, often we hear, especially youth, running away from places and stuff like that. They just want to be with their parents, and so just, understanding what's normal for that youth, I think can reduce the trauma. There's so much trauma that comes into play when you separate children and youth from their parent. Bringing community and partnerships together to surround and encompass the family to make that more successful on whatever that takes to have that family unit be solidified.
Definitely makes sense, the importance of sort of having the family you're familiar with around you. And so you're a co-chair of the Family Reunification Day Steering Committee. And a big, goal of theirs is to help host the events around Washington, the Family Reunification Day celebrations. Can you tell me a little bit about why these celebrations are important to reunified families and what they mean to the parents and children who attend?
Sure. And so as a steering advisor committee, we kind of help brainstorm around ideas, small counties, big counties, however they can celebrate families. If it's from, just buying a cake and, acknowledging the parents with a certificate, or we have some areas that have full-blown bouncy houses and superheroes and all kinds of things and games and, what have you. And I think it's important because we often hear about all these service providers. We hear about the court. We hear about the department. We hear about local agencies. But at the end of the day, it's those parents that have worked really hard and gotten through all those services. And not only that, they have to be approved by the department and the courts to see if they successfully completed them and graduate, and they can implement them. So it's not just a one and done, like, oh, I did this class, I get a certificate, I'm done, right? And so there's a lot of oversight and observation about how parents do their services in their classes and if they can implement them, with their family, their children, their daily lives and what have you. So there's always this microscope, fine-tooth combing going on. And so for a parent to get all the way through that and get that closure of a case, I think this is the ultimate. It's just to celebrate how well they did. And so I also push really hard for these celebrations to be focused on the parent. We don't get everybody together to acknowledge businesses. This should be all 100% about the parent. Another thing that we've done here, I say local, I'm in the Thurston County area. I've partnered with Mason County, Lewis County. I try to attend Grays Harbor and Cowlitz County, just support our surrounding counties. And another thing that we try to encourage is to invite law enforcement. And the results, because Thurston County's been doing it for quite a few years, Mason County's been doing it, because so often law enforcement is ripping these families apart and they never get to see the end of it. Or, they're taking a parent to jail and they never know if there's a positive result. And 9 times out of 10 when we have law enforcement come, they get emotional to see that kind of growth and that outcome. And so it also, in turn, shows the parent that law enforcement are real people as well, right? And that's another thing too, is getting all these entities together, getting the DCYF at these events, because there's usually a really good outcome from DCYF as well. And so to see a parent interact with the social worker and the judge in a park maybe, it's just, you can't beat that. You can't buy that kind of relationship. And so in most areas, a judicial officer, 1 or 2, I know Mason County almost always, it's like every judicial officer and every supervisor from their department comes. And to see that kind of interaction in a park with a parent and their children is just, it's like the ultimate closure. And then these parents see that you can give back. And then most of them, they turn around and they're like, I want to help other parents. It's just a really unique dynamic that happens. And you can't write that stuff. You can't make that stuff up.
That's fantastic, seeing that growth. And speaking of growth, you've sort of seen these celebrations go from the very humble beginnings, kind of loosely organized, to having a full committee about them and, happening across counties throughout the state. What would you say makes a successful Family Reunification Day celebration?
It's funny you asked that. This morning I was talking with a court coordinator because she got some things dumped in her lap and she's like, I don't know what to do. And I said, you know what? There's some basic things. Make sure you have parents there. I've been to reunification celebrations and all of a sudden there's like one parent. And it's like, okay, we got things turned around here. So make sure your parents are there. Make sure there's activities for the children and youth or the parents to do with their children, right? And then, what's really nice is if there's a judicial officer there to hand them a certificate of reunification. Parents that have gone through the system, most of them love certificates. It's those markers to show that they've had these accomplishments, right? So I say those things, have some giveaways maybe that they can walk away with, and food. Food's always a good thing, right? You feed them and they shall come, right? To break bread with everybody. And those are the key things, and we have some across the state that have very simple, like you were, saying, and then there's some that are very elaborate. And the important thing is just to have them, right? And there are monies now available for each of the counties, to get reimbursed if they do have these celebrations. So we're trying to create incentives as well, and yeah.
Yeah, giving counties a chance to show that they really care about this process and reunification seems huge, and a little bit of pizza to go along with it doesn't hurt.
Oh yeah.
So you've been seeing these for a few years now. Do you have any anecdotes or stories from a favorite Reunification Day celebration that you can remember, or one that really stood out to you?
I have to say, this is my opportunity, and anybody who's ever talked to me about reunification knows I'm going to say this. But Mason County was able, 3 unifications ago, was able to give away a car to a parent.
Wow.
And this year, so June, they were able to give away their second car. So they were the first and the second county in the entire state to have a car to give away. And that all came because the previous year, we had a really good reunification day in Mason County. And the supervisor over there, we were debriefing, and she goes, the only thing that would make this better is if we had a car to give away to a parent, because there's so many of them that lack transportation. And transportation is such a barrier to, getting their services, having family time, what have you. The number one barrier is housing. I think we all know that statewide, nationwide. But to actually be able to give a car away is the most beautiful, exciting thing. We've given away many things at these events. I've seen beach gift baskets, I've seen movie night baskets, I've seen flat screen TVs, power tools, but to give away a car, that has got to be the ultimate. And I have challenged all other counties, like, hey, Mason County's raised the bar, right?
Nice.
Put a little friendly, healthy competition out there, but also, I've been to counties where it was their first or second one, and they're all worried about meeting the mark of other counties. And it's like, what? Just focus on what we're here for, celebrating those parents and families, And so I think when we make sure that we keep our focus front and center, then we stay right sized and, we're right in line for why we're here, is to celebrate parents and families so they don't come back, right? And then I've been to a Reunification Day celebration just last month where there was a family. Their case was over 7 years old.
Wow.
And when their case closed, the social worker was so happy she brought a cake to court. And so their case closed, it's been at least a year ago. And to see them still together, mom, dad, and their 2 boys, and their attorney was there, their social worker was there. I mean, that's when they keep coming back, just to show up, just to celebrate, their sober time, or to be there to show other parents like, hey, this is possible. Look what we did, right? And that's another thing too, is most of them, they have speakers. So they usually have 2 parents speak and share a little bit of their story, ideally
Okay.
maybe a mom and then a dad or something, And then I went to Reunification Day last year where I refer to him as the de facto dad. Because when his case came in, he was not biologically the dad to this little girl, but that's all she's ever known. And her mother had passed, and this man had continued raising this little girl. So they weren't letting him be part of the case initially. But, OPD, I say OPD is Washington State Office of Public Defense, stepped in, talked to one of the attorneys over there. They got some paperwork filed. And this dad was able to continue to parent this little girl who was screaming and crying for her dad, the only family member she knew, right? And he was able to get his case closed just under a year, which is difficult. Most cases don't close in under a year. And he was able to do that. And he went on to be a guest speaker at that Reunification Day, so that was just beautiful. And he went on to be an OPD social service worker. So he's given back now to see those kind of things. I like to give a shout out to Spokane County because a lot of their alumni dress up in superhero costumes, and they make it a superhero themed event.
That's awesome.
I know. I have not been able to attend one yet, but I've seen pictures, and they all get involved, and there's a lot of donations that come in. And so, yeah, I like to throw that one out there. And then Thurston County partnered with Hands on Children's Museum a couple years ago. We had 2 really nice, huge events there, and we're hoping to have that continued relationship, and then we bring in community partners who bring in resource tables, and then they have local vendors. So it becomes more of a community thing, right? And I mean, most kids can find something to do at Hands on Children's Museum, so it keeps them occupied.
Well, that's awesome, and you can really tell how much these events, range from giving out cars to, the simple events to superhero celebrations. That's really great and fantastic, and it's awesome hearing all these different, potentially life-changing moments for these people. Getting a new car completely can change the dynamic to being reunited with someone, they view as their father and daughter. These celebrations really seem like a chance, to celebrate these wins for these people who have worked so hard. And steering committee seems like they take a big lead in that. And, sort of focusing on that, the actual reunification between, parent and their children or their child. What does it mean to these parents to have finally completed this process? What is some of the thoughts and feelings that might be going through their head as, someone who has lived through this experience themselves?
I don't know if I exactly find the best words, and because I think everybody goes through a different process, because in the beginning, most parents are pissed off, frustrated, and confused. And they look at most people that approach them as the enemy because they're hurting so bad, that deep-seated pain and angst that you can't even put words to being kind of, parents feel like they're forced into court, they're forced into services. It's just how they feel, a lot of them. And then once the ego settles a little bit and doing these services, then it just seems so tedious and so long. It seems so far away. And then when you get to the end, it's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I made it here. This is done. And there's many parents that fear losing that support team that they've created along the way, even
Definitely.
though they weren't their favorite people in the beginning, or there was a lot of push and tug. And to get to the end, there's this feeling, I'll speak a little bit for myself and many that I've worked with, there's this feeling that you're pushed out of the nest. It's like you've been, in the beginning, you can do nothing but look for that. But in the beginning, there's no concept of time and how long this is going to take. And so a month seems like forever, and most cases, on average, I'm going to throw out a number just off the top of my head, about 15 months, maybe 18 months. But if you tell a parent that in the beginning, they're like, no way.
Yeah.
Get away, get out of my life. I'm not doing this for 18 months, right? But when that comes to an end, there's usually a lot of tears and hugging and stuff like this. A lot of parents are receiving things they've never received before. Obviously, if they had all these tools and everything in place, they wouldn't be here, And so to get to that end and to have, I've sat in many dismissals, graduations from therapeutic courts, and there's a lot of where the judges will go around and let each of the entities speak on behalf of the parent or the family, so that's the department social worker, that's the AAG, the parent attorneys, and at graduations from therapeutic courts, a lot of judges invite their peers to speak on their behalf, or community partners, or family members, or just friends they bring, right? And to have, because most parents, not all, most parents show up to that very first hearing alone, right? And then by the time you get to the end, I've seen some where, it's standing room only in the courtroom. Wow. So to go from that to that is just huge. And to see they built that. And then also, all of us that have worked with that family feel better when they have this community around them, knowing as a professional, you see that they have this community and you know that they're probably going to be okay, right?
Yeah, that's fantastic. You always assume there's growth having completed this long, arduous process, but to actually be able to see the physical growth of going from an empty courtroom to a big courtroom full of supporters, I feel like that's just such a huge boon of support for them.
Yeah, and sometimes, I worked with department workers where they're like, you remember so-and-so? She calls me every May to tell me she's got another year sober. And those kind of things, it just, it lights up your heart and it's what keeps you going. And, I worked with DCYF workers who aren't doing the direct, intense practice, and they'll just come sit in court every once in a while or sit in a therapeutic court and just get their cup filled, to say, hey, this is why I do this, right? And I mean, I don't think I've ever sat in a therapeutic court where I didn't walk away feeling better myself, because, yeah, you're going to hear some people who are struggling. But that one story where you see and hear the growth in somebody, it's just, magical. You just can't make that stuff up.
That's awesome. Well, that's where we're going to end off today. Tonia, thank you so much for joining the podcast and providing your insight and experience into family reunification. Any last things you want to sign off with?
I just want to say thank you for having me. Anytime I can talk about parents or reunification, I mean, I think that's our Northern Star. And thank you, AOC, because, right now, AOC and OPD are the only two entities that offer funding for counties to put on these celebrations. So I just thank you for that. And I invite you to come view one time. Anybody that wants to come and observe a Reunification Day, AOC posts them on their website every year. So, and this year is the first year we're starting our memory book online, so people go through and see what's happening in other areas. So thank you so much for today.
That's awesome. Thank you, Tonia. You have a nice day.
You too. Thank you.
And that's all for today's episode. Once again, a huge thanks to Tonia McClanahan for coming on the show and providing some great insight into the family reunification process. For more information on family reunification as a whole, celebration details, and a copy of the Governor's Proclamation, visit www.courts.wa.gov. And on behalf of Washington's Administrative Office of the Courts, thank you for listening to this episode of the Washington Courts Report. If you're interested in hearing more, you can subscribe to Washington Courts on YouTube or Washington Courts Report on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, where new episodes will be releasing monthly. New episodes will also be posted on the Washington Court Facebook and LinkedIn pages upon release. Once again, thanks for listening and have a great day.